This program are brought to you by Chevrolet, who invite you to take charge of a new Chevrolet car or truck at your Chevy dealer now.
Rabbi Meir Kahane is founder and chairman of the International Jewish Defense League. That's a militant organization he founded in 1968, oriented towards self-defense. Its slogan is "Never Again," coined by the survivors of World War II concentration camps. Born in the United States and educated in Orthodox Jewish day schools, he was ordained a rabbi by the yeshiva in Brooklyn, New York in 1957. Kahane claims American Jewry can find security only by adopting the JDL program, Preparing for Armed Self-Defense. Kahane also admits JDL tactics were inspired by black militant groups such as the Black Panthers. He's been condemned by many as a demagogue, bigot, and an exponent of the use of violence. New York Mayor Ed Koch has denounced Kahane as a disgrace to Jews and compared him to Yasser Arafat, chairman of the PLO. Rabbi Kahane arrived in the United States late this afternoon and is with me this evening here in New York. Welcome, Rabbi. I'm glad you could be with us. I think it's important for people who are not familiar with your views and with your stance to give a short explanation, as we did at the beginning of the program. And before we go into some of those areas in more depth, and that I do want to do this evening, I'd like to find out first from you in more detail why your trip to this country.
Over the last three weeks, there has been a tremendous amount of agitation on the West Bank, in Judea, Samaria. Jewish cars stoned, 2 Jews killed. In retaliation, Jews attacked Arabs. Over this past week, some 9 of our people were arrested for self-defense. People who live on the West Bank, people whose wives and children and friends are threatened daily. And I'm here to, first of all, to point out to American Jews that the problem of the West Bank is an insoluble one if we keep on thinking in terms of coexistence. The Arabs believe it is their country. I understand the Arabs. I respect the Arabs. There is no coexistence possible with them. They have to leave. And secondly, I want to protest the fact that Jews who defend themselves in the very same way that members of Mr. Begin's underground group, Irgun, did 35 and 40 years ago, are now arrested by Mr. Begin.
But I think many people would say that 35 and 40 years ago was quite different than now, and perhaps it is time to have peaceful coexistence. You say there can be none. You want the Arabs to leave.
Right.
The Arabs say, the Palestinians say that it is their homeland. Why should they leave?
Because they want me to leave, and I understand them, and I respect them. I understand the Arabs, and the Arabs understand me, and neither of us could understand you, and neither of us can understand the Jewish leaders who speak about sharing the country. The Arabs believe it's all theirs. Why should they share it with foreigners? The Arabs are not speaking about the West Bank. Before there was a 1967 war, what was bothering the Arabs then? Why did the Arabs not accept the UN plan of 1947, which would have given them the West Bank and a great deal more as a so-called Palestine state? The answer is that they believe that Tel Aviv is as much Arab as Hebron, and I understand them. But it is not, because both are really Jewish. And therefore, since they have 22 countries, God bless each and every one of them, I want them to live in any one or all of those countries and let me have my one country.
I'd like to pick up on something you just said. You said you understand the Arabs and the Arabs understand you, but
Yes.
you could never understand me.
Yes.
I would also like to go to some material that is put out by your organization about you, some background material on you, picking up on what you have just said. I am quoting out of the background material. When all else fails, we are allowed and obligated to use any means, including violence, to save fellow Jews. It's the next line that I really want to point out. For Jews, there are no permanent allies except other Jews, and Jewish interests come first.
That's right.
So therefore, you feel that someone who isn't Jewish would never be your ally?
No, I said he would never be my permanent ally. Nations don't have allies. Nations have interests.
But people can be allies to other people.
I don't doubt that an individual here, individual there, yes. But if you're speaking in the practical terms of to whom can Jews turn in large measure, there are no other peoples. For years, when I was forming the JDL here, I waited for all of the minority groups that Jews had helped so many times, all through the years. How many of those groups marched for Russian Jews? How many of those ethnic groups marched for Syrian Jews? How many of those groups marched for Israel? So I am not a fool. I don't expect more. The Jew has got to realize that his interests come first as a Jew, just as I fully expect and appreciate that the black will not expect the NAACP to take its money and give it to Israel. I don't
going
expect
along
it.
with that kind of thinking, how will we ever get together as a race of human beings?
I can respect my fellow human beings, and I can love my fellow human beings, but just as I would expect that I and you would expect to help your family first. And that doesn't mean that by your putting your mother or your father before some other person, that doesn't mean that you don't love that other person or can't live with that person, but there are priorities. Your family, your people, and then others. My people come before other people.
Yes, I understand what you are saying, but let's stop right there for a minute and go into that thought. Yes, I think it is natural that people worry about their immediate family first. But then, if you are saying to worry about your people second, in this world there are many people who I could say who are my people, all right?
Mm-hmm.
But I don't agree with what they stand for, because everyone is an individual. I don't agree with what they stand for. I don't feel they have the same morality that I have. I wouldn't want to put them first simply because they were my people.
First of all, if your brother is a bum, he's your brother. That doesn't change. The Jewish people, and I'm speaking now as a rabbi, an Orthodox rabbi, is one people, and it's a special people, and it's a chosen people. And I didn't make up that statement. It's in the Bible. You can ask any Baptist. We are a chosen people, and therefore we have a certain common goal. Whether he's a good Jew or a bad Jew, he's a Jew, and there's a Jewish boat. And all Jews are in that boat, even those Jews who would like to jump out of that boat, as so many German Jews thought that they could do in the 1920s. They were Germans. They weren't Jewish. They were Germans until the Gentile came and said, not so. You're a Jew. We're Jews first. And we are God's chosen people. And that's whether we like it or not.
I'm beginning to hear something, and I want you to help me out on this. I'm beginning to hear something that sounds very similar to some of the statements that were made throughout Nazi Germany about Aryans and the Aryan race, and they should stay together, and they couldn't be mixed with anyone else because then it wouldn't be pure.
You have a very, very serious problem.
I do?
Yes. And that problem is that your quarrel is not with Meir Kahane, but with the Bible. And that's a problem that you have. I don't have that problem. Because every word that I've said now,
yes,
and every sentence and every thought is from the Bible.
But you see, Rabbi, I have heard people quote the Bible for whatever purpose they want to. I have been doing this kind of interview program for 10 years, and I have heard the Bible quoted to support many different points of view. Many.
There's not one
and
Orthodox
many of them
rabbi,
opposing points of view.
There's not one Orthodox rabbi in the world that won't say what I just said.
But then why do so many people get upset when you say it?
Because most Orthodox rabbis don't have the courage to say it. I said there's not one Orthodox rabbi who wouldn't say it if he had the courage to say it.
It seems to me, though, we're working so hard. I think many people in this world are working so hard for us all to be able to understand each other and to get along with each other and to love each other. And if you are still segmenting and putting people into groups and saying, only a Jew can help a Jew, and therefore you have to stay together. Then you have only women can help women, only blacks can help blacks, only Catholics can help Catholics. That's going to separate us again as a world of people.
I can respect people, and I can love people, but I don't have to go to bed with other people. We Jews are a separate people. Otherwise, there's no point to being Jewish at all. Then there's no point to in Israel, a Jewish state. On the contrary, I think that the greatest racists are those people who boast of being proud of being Jewish and haven't got the slightest logical reason to explain why they want to put up barriers between peoples. Now, I know why I put up barriers, because God said so. And again, I'll challenge any Orthodox rabbi
Many people
to differ with that.
Many people who are Jewish do not at all agree with what you say, and they disagree vehemently with what you say.
I would say that the average Jew would not know Judaism if he fell over it. We wrote the Bible, and the Baptists study it. The average Jew doesn't know anything about Judaism. I can't think of a single faith that is more abysmally ignorant of the most fundamental concepts of its faith than the Jews.
And I am sure there are many people who are listening now, whether they are Jewish or not, find that statement upsetting, if not angering. And I'm sure there are many Jewish people who feel that they are just as devout in their Judaism as you feel you are in yours.
I think that most people that are ignorant of things usually do think that they know something. I'm speaking here, I'm not trying to make points with people. I'm speaking as a rabbi who has studied and who does know. The tragedy of American Judaism is that it's a Judaism which was created, it created God in its own image. The average Jew in this country does not believe that the Bible is divine. And if that's true, and I respect his right to that. In that case, then, why does the average Jew, and believe me, it's true that the average Jew gets upset when his child comes home with someone who's not Jewish? Now, that's the biggest racist in the entire world.
Wouldn't you get upset?
Of course, but I have a reason. I believe that when the Bible says that Jews should not marry outside of their faith, it's God's law. That's a reason. But if you don't believe it, then you're nothing but a pure racist. And that's why the average parent has tremendous problems, not problems, impossibility. He simply cannot explain to his youngster why he or she should not marry outside of their faith.
We have to break away for just a few moments. We'll be back right after these messages. Stay with us.
To walk around freely saying and doing that which he does. Now, just an hour ago, I was phoned by Israel Radio to state that 45 people, including many of mine, attempted to enter the Temple Mount, Jerusalem, and they were arrested. They attempted to establish a Jewish presence there. That will certainly not make things easier for me when I go back Monday. I find it outrageous that the Temple Mount, which is the site of the two holy temples, the holiest site in all of Judaism, is a place in which by law a Jew cannot enter. Israel controls it, will not allow Jews to even enter it out of fear of upsetting Arabs. Well, I'm not afraid of upsetting Arabs. If it's mine, if it's my holiest site, what are they doing there? At the very least, you can allow them both there. And that's why our people enter there, and that's why it's not going to make it easier for this arrest warrant.
You had said that people in your organization have not been responsible for some of the events that have been occurring in Israel.
I've said that they were not at all responsible in any manner, shape, or form for the death of a demonstrator of the Peace Now movement.
All right. There have been, when you were here in this country with the JDL, since you have gone to Israel, you went to Israel in 1971, and now with the Kach organization that you run in Israel, there have been many times when you have gone against the Israeli government, the Israeli establishment. One case in point, where you went against some of the feelings of the people of Israel. After the massacre, many of the people of Israel were demanding the inquiry. They said that this was a terrible tragedy, that those lives should not have been lost that way. It should not have happened that way. And it was many of the people of Israel in the Peace Now movement that really demanded the inquiry that occurred. At that time, the Attorney General at one time warned the Jewish Defense League's chapter in Israel that there was a poster describing the massacre of Palestinians in Beirut as divine retribution for past murders of Jews, and he said that it was unlawful.
First of all,
I will go on further to say, when it was brought to his attention, he felt it crossed the borderline of what is permissible within the wide framework of freedom of expression into the criminal realm of incitement to revolt.
First of all, I am not bound by anything that he says. If he indeed feels that what I have said somehow is worthy of a prison term, if any American out there listening thinks that that sentence warrants someone being put into prison, then he is welcome to that kind of a democracy.
No, but what he is saying is he did not want the posters up because he felt that they were an incitement to riot.
I can tell you that there are 15 posters placed in Jerusalem every single morning which incite me to anger and riot. Freedom of speech is not limited to those things that keep everyone happy and complacent. Sometimes posters anger people furiously. That doesn't mean that that poster should not be up there. Yes, and I'll say it again. I find it amazing. Arabs kill Arabs, and Jews hold an inquiry which wrecks the army, which forces the ouster of some of our finest generals. I don't weep over the fact that yesterday Christian Arabs killed Muslim Arabs, because the day before Muslim Arabs killed Christian Arabs, and because in the 1920s and 30s and 40s both of them killed Jews. In 1929 in Hebron, where I live, in one day 67 Jews were massacred.
But
well, who do you think massacred them? Jews?
There were atrocities.
Arabs massacred them.
There were atrocities
committed by Arabs against Arabs in Beirut. That's
atrocities in the present.
There were Arabs killed Arabs. Arabs killed Arabs. So let Arabs investigate the massacre and not Jews.
You have once said, rather than so many of us have heard an eye for an eye, you once said 2 eyes for 1 eye.
Absolutely. I suggest to you that perhaps, I don't know how old you are, but I remember I was a youngster in World War II. And I remember every night the Allied bombers going over German cities and bombing those cities with 1,000 bombers at a time. Cologne and Hamburg and Dresden and Berlin. I don't recall anybody protesting the fact that they were bombing those cities. Who do you think was being killed there? Generals? When you're in a war against an implacable enemy, and especially the Arabs, who for 60 years have massacred Jews, have raped women, who would wipe out Israel if they could, I don't weep for them. It's that simple. It's my enemy, and I don't weep for my enemy.
We have people waiting on the phones for you, Rabbi. Let's go to line 4. Line 4, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Rabbi, I was wondering if you could clear up a question for me. Is to be a Jew, is to be of a nation or of a religion?
It is, of course, both. The Jewish people became a nation of God at Mount Sinai. It is a people that was given a covenant, a religio nation.
Thank you for your call. Line 1, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. I always learned that everyone was equal in God's eyes, and I've never known God to deal in real estate. I think he's beyond materialism. But I have a question for Rabbi Kahane, which seems very confident in what he's saying about God and all sorts of religious questions. In light of that Palestine was inhabited by Jews and Arabs before Israel was created by the United Nations, the fact that that displaced Palestinians did not start any war with the state of Israel, how can he forbid Palestinians not to have their own homeland, just as he has his own in Israel, which I question, because I don't know whether he carries an Israeli or an American passport.
An Israeli passport. All right, I have nothing, if the so-called Palestine people want a state, I am all for that. I have nothing against that state. I am all for that state in Syria or in Iraq or in any of the 22 countries that the Arabs have. I don't have 22 countries, I have one country, and that's mine. And I haven't come to ask for it. I don't come to beg for it. Israel is not mine because of the League of Nations or the UN. It's because we lived there long before there were Arabs. Abraham was not an Arab. Neither was Isaac, neither was Jacob. It's the land of the Jewish people. There's no debate about it. And that's it.
But there is a debate about it.
There's no debate about it in our minds. The world has long before there was a Jewish state, long before there was an Israel, we learned what it meant to live as strangers in someone else's land. And we don't want that anymore. With all due respect to all the Gentiles, they have their countries, we want ours. I don't want to be a minority again, ever again.
The Palestinians want theirs.
Let them have it, but it's not the land of Israel.
They want their land, their homes, where many of them grew up. That is basically what home
They
means.
had an opportunity in 1947 when the UN proposed in that land two states. And the Jews said, all right, we'll take our half. And the Arabs said no. And they gambled. And they attacked not Hebron and not the West Bank. They attacked Haifa and Tel Aviv. And they lost. And when you start a war and you lose, you lose. It isn't a monopoly game. We go back to go. We lost 6,000 people in that war.
We have to break away for just 2 minutes here. We'll continue this conversation as soon as we return. Stay with us, please. Welcome back. My guest this evening is Rabbi Meir Kahane. We have many people on the phones. We're going to get back to one of those calls right now. Line 2, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Yes, we've discussed a great deal about war and killing people. Tomorrow, Rabbi, if the world could start with a clean slate, what would be your resolution to the problem? I mean, how is this going to be resolved?
I would first of all tell every single Jew to go back to being Jewish the way he really should, or she should. Go back to Judaism, and the Messiah would come tomorrow, and then we would have peace. Now that's my instant peace plan, and I may form some group tomorrow called Peace Instantly.
That is your instant peace plan,
That's
but
right.
that is not your interim peace plan.
That's right, because there is no interim peace plan, and I'm not a demagogue. There are those people that say if you give up land, then there's peace. Then there are those that say if you don't give up land, then there's peace. No, it's not true. It's not that simple.
But your interim plan consists of one of where your organization instructs people in karate, instructs people in weaponry.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Why?
Because I would rather know how and not have to than have to and not know how.
That's understandable to a certain degree. Being able to protect oneself. Forewarned is forearmed and everything else. But there seems to be an edge of anger, an edge of terrorism involved with your organization, and that is what frightens many people.
I don't believe that. I think that what frightens most Jews is the fact that most Jews would like to keep a very low profile. I think that most Jews, especially in this country, despite all their protestations about being equal and so on, have a little worm inside, a fear of what will they say, what will they think. And it upsets them to see Jews taking a rather high profile. I wish tomorrow morning that there would be no swords in this world. I wish tomorrow morning that the vision of the prophets that they shall beat their swords into plowshares will come true. But if my enemy has a sword, I don't intend to have a plowshare.
Line 7, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'm calling from Orlando, Florida, Sandy. Thank you very much for putting this dog on the TV to show the Israeli face the way it truly is. In 1948, there were no leaders for the Palestinian people to speak for them. First of all, they were still under British occupation. And there were no leaders like the PLO today to represent or accept the decision that the United Nations made. That's for one. For two, God chooses the people. The Jewish chose them to be number one people or chose them on the other people. But he also, after they didn't believe in Jesus Christ, he dropped them down that he made some of them to monkeys and some of them to pigs. That's why the Muslims don't eat the pigs, and that's why the Jewish themselves don't eat the pigs. Rabbi should be arrested and should never be allowed to be in the USA, a great country like the USA, and a terrorist, a murderer, man who burned mosques and killed children and discriminate against the entire world, including the American people who fed him, who protected him, who always look after him, sitting over here and discriminate against them. Man should be arrested, should be hanged like Hitler.
Sir, thank you very much for your comments. I think it's only fair that we give the rabbi an opportunity to respond. I am sure that kind of attack is not new to you.
Yes, and I don't think that there's anything to say. When I walk in the street and a dog barks at me, I generally don't bark back. So there's really no response.
Line 3, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Rabbi Kahane, how many people you think from Israel you represent? And another question, how many times you try to get Israeli votes to get to the Knesset?
All right.
I
don't know if I represent anybody. And who cares? And what relevance does that have to anything? Since when is truth synonymous with how many votes have I got? For the most part, as Walter Lippmann once wrote, great men don't become presidents.
Was it 3 times that you tried for the Knesset?
Right. And I may try 4 times and fail, and 5 times and fail. And as the rabbis say in the Talmud, 48 prophets arose in Israel, and they all failed. And I'm not even a prophet.
Line 4, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes, you're on the air.
I'd like to ask him, what does he think about Reagan's peace plan?
Very little. I think that it's a warmed-over rehash of the Rogers plan. And I don't say why everyone gets so excited about it. I think that there was no essential difference between a Republican peace plan or one of any party. I think that Carter and Reagan and Nixon, in the long run, were essentially for Israel giving up all of the lands of 1967. So I don't think much of that. I think that Mr. Reagan should perhaps concentrate upon Mexican demands for the return of the homelands of Arizona and New Mexico and Texas and California and Utah. I think that before he goes around telling us to give up lands which would leave Israel 15 miles wide, let him worry about perhaps some of the lands that were taken from Mexico by this country.
What about the right of someone who is leader of a country that is giving an unbelievable amount of aid to Israel? Does that not give that leader meaning the President of the United States, Ronald Reagan, a right?
Absolutely. Absolutely right. And if I were the Prime Minister of Israel, I would say, every penny that you've given us, we've given you back in so many, many ways. For example, you've always wanted to have a good look at a Soviet T-72 tank. We showed you it. You've always wanted to know how your F-16 planes do in real combat. Our pilots flew it and told you how they flew it. How much is that worth to the CIA? And if Mr. Reagan says that's not worth it, then I say, then you have every right to stop giving us money. And we'll eat tomatoes, but you're not going to buy us with the money.
Former President Carter is currently in Israel.
Great mistake.
Why?
If Mr. Begin had any sense of self-respect, a person who, according to his advisor, once called Mr. Begin a psycho, any person who would have any kind of self-respect would have told Mr. Carter that he's not welcome. I think that Mr. Carter is a cheap shill who has gone on this trip just to push his new book. And someone who, a day before going to Israel, met with the top leaders with two top leaders of the PLO, has no business being in Israel. I don't blame Carter. I blame Begin.
Line 1, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I would like to ask the rabbi, why is he so strongly against Palestinian violence when his country wages war against the Palestinians, and doesn't he feel that a more passive resistance would be a more effective and appropriate method to obtain peace?
I'm not sure that I quite got that second part. I don't see where the I understand your first part. I am not one of those people that believes that violence per se is bad. Violence is sometimes good, sometimes bad. The Bible says there's a time for war and a time for peace.
Does it depend on who's winning, if the violence is good or bad?
No, it depends upon who is right. When the Germans bombed Coventry in World War II and the British bombed Berlin in World War II, only simpletons and or knaves would say it was the same thing. Cops have guns and robbers have guns. That doesn't make cops robbers.
Yes, but if you are doing something that is totally separate, I mean, absolutely, some people say one man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist.
Exactly
so
right.
There is a fine line there. But who then becomes the judge? You?
Well, obviously, when we hanged the Nazis in Nuremberg, we were the judges. Had the Nazis won, they would have hanged Roosevelt and Taft and Dewey, too. Well, obviously, there is an objective truth in this world. And as a rabbi, one who believes that that Bible is that truth, I believe that the land of Israel is ours because it was given by God. That's my objective truth.
One of the things in it, I want to bring up something that a professor at the University of Vermont has said. That is Raoul Hilberg. I imagine you would be familiar with his work. He is an authority on Jewish history and on the Holocaust. And he claims that there were 4 phases towards the legal murder in Nazi Germany. 4 prerequisites, in other words, for this to be able to happen. And I think it's important to look at those 4 prerequisites. The first one was the question, who was a Jew, to find them. The second prerequisite was expropriation, taking away the wealth and the power of the Jews. The third part was concentration, placing the Jews in one single place, making them wear the armband so that they were identified. And the fourth was deportation, sending all of the Jews out of Germany, denationalizing them. Therefore, there was no government to protect them. They had no legal rights. Therefore, they had no laws. Therefore, the killing of 6 million Jews was deemed legal murder. It was clean violence. Now, what is this same thing? The parallel. Look at the Palestinians. Who are the Palestinians? And then they don't have their homes anymore. They don't have their wealth or power. That's the second part. The third part being, placing them in one area so they're identified. And the fourth part, leaving them without any legal recourse. Do you see that parallel?
Of course not. Of course not. The Jews of Germany never claimed that Germany was really Israel, and that when they would become a majority or when they would have power, they would seize that country and call it Israel. But that's exactly what the Arabs are saying about Israel. The so-called Palestine people, including those who live inside Israel, in the state of Israel, will of course say to you, if we become a majority, let's say legally, and democratically, we will have a majority, we'll have the votes, we will change Israel to Palestine. Of course, it's a totally different game. I am all for a Palestine somewhere outside of Israel. In fact, I'll be the very first one to give money to the UPA, United Palestine Appeal. But not in my country. Not in my country. I only have one country.
But they feel they only have one home as well.
They had their chance to have that home, and they decided to have the whole thing. And they killed us in the 20s, and they killed us in the 30s, and they killed us in the 40s when Jews pleaded with them, let's divide. And they said no. Well, they have reaped the fruits of their own particular labors. And if it's sad, then let them establish a country called Palestine in Jordan, or in Iraq, or in Syria, or anywhere else. But not in my country.
We have to break away one more time. We'll do that right now, and when we return, we'll be getting to more of your calls. Stay with us.
Yes, please. My question is, how can he consider Israel a democratic state, and he's saying that it is only for Jews or being a Jewish state?
Well, quite obviously, when the Poles re-established Poland in 1919, they established a Polish state. When Ghana became free in 1960, it was an African state. Kenya is an African state, and Israel is a Jewish state. Now, I certainly, and I must say this, I've come here, this country, for a couple of days to protest about certain aspects in that in Israel. I mean, some of our youngsters are now sitting in prison under a condition which I certainly feel is not worthy of Israel.
Why didn't you protest? Why didn't you stay in Israel and protest there?
Well, I was there, and I did a great deal. And now I thought that for this weekend, it's important that the American Jews hear of this, because American pressure is very, very strong. And I would hope that all of these people that really know of me only through the news media, which is a terrible way to know of anybody, would come down this Sunday at 2 p.m. to the Prince George Hotel.
Please don't give dates, because this will air at other times, and it will be very, very confusing. Well, they may not see it on the original broadcast.
Okay.
That is the problem there. Line 2, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good evening, Ms. Freeman. My question is, I'm calling from Hartford, Connecticut.
Yes.
And my question is, do you think it's possible for the Palestinians and the Jewish people to live together in peace?
Certainly. I think that it would be a very, very great thing if the Jews lived in their country and the Palestinians, as you call them, or as they call themselves, would have their country somewhere outside of the land of Israel. I am more than willing to live in peace with them on that basis.
Thank you very much for your call. I would like to we have in our conversation covered some of the people that I would like to have your reaction to already. We talked briefly about President Reagan, former President Carter. I would like you to tell me more specifically your feelings on Menachem Begin.
When I was a boy of 14, I joined the youth group of the Irgun, which was the Jewish group led by Mr. Begin. And he was a very, very great hero, not only of mine personally, but of many, many Jews. When he became the prime minister, we had great, great hopes. And that night, I recall well, in Jerusalem, the streets were filled with shouting people, happy people, singing Begin, King of Israel. I think he's not done what I thought. He's been a disappointment. I think that we really believed that when he got up in the years that he was in the opposition and said, the land of Israel is all ours, that he would annex the territories, and he did not. I think that we never dreamed that he would give up the Sinai. I think that in so many, many, many ways he is not the Begin that we once thought. The reason why I wanted to be in the Knesset, and why I want to be in the Knesset, is to make Mr. Begin again.
What of the new defense minister, Moshe Aarons?
I know Moshe Aarons from the time he was the head of the same group of Beitar in this country. He is a very, very talented person, very honest person, and nevertheless he is a person who yesterday took down the Koch settlement near Hebron. I don't want to be disappointed in Mr. Aarons too.
And do you feel you are at this point because he took down the Koch settlement?
Yes. I think that that's the first Jewish settlement that has been taken down now on the West Bank, and I think that's a terrible precedent.
Part of the reason that was given for it were because of some of the violence that has been going on in that area.
You don't take down a settlement because of violence initiated by Arabs. You certainly don't take down a settlement because members of that settlement fought back against that violence. Mr. Aarons would be among the very, very first to praise the Irgun soldiers who used violence against the British, against the objections of the majority of Jews who were living in what was then Palestine.
But according to the New York Times, the directive was reportedly in response to 3 shootings at Arab homes and vehicles in the area in the last 10 days that were believed to have been carried out by the residents of that settlement.
Right. Well, the New York Times has a pretty good way of starting history when it wants to, like
Except
10 days ago.
Except the fact is, it was done for a reason. That's a pretty serious thing,
like
to break up a settlement, is it not?
Yes, it is.
All right, so there must have been a serious reason to incur
I am waiting for the government of Israel to break up the first Arab village because of violence from that village.
We have to take this one last time out. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We only have a few minutes left. Rabbi, I would like to get your reaction to some of the reports coming out of Israel today. And these are not official reports, but it has been said that some officials in Israel are saying that Israel is prepared to drop its demand for 5 Israeli manned outposts on Lebanese territory after Israeli troops leave the country. Your reaction to that news out of Israel?
Well, that's part of the unfortunate pattern of Begin. This is part of his not being Begin. What has happened is that since Israel entered Lebanon, reached its capital city, was on the verge of physically wiping out the PLO, Begin has given up again and again. Again a retreat, again a retreat.
And you see this as another...
Absolutely.
The final.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for being with me this evening, Rabbi Meir Kahane.